freaking first cut. Golly. Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's WGC-FedEx St. Jude Invitational. And joining me to break it all down, Sia Nejad is here. Sia, what's up?
Rick, I don't know if you remember, but last week we liked Xander Schauffele, of course. And after the show, you might not remember this, but I said, and I quote, the only way he's going to win gold is if he holds off Rory Sabatini and CT Pan, and boom, here we are.
That's right. Did we get that? We might have just stopped recording, I think, before you said
gotten that on. Yeah.
That's Jacob's fault. Producer Jacob. She always keep it running. So that
definitely said that, and I definitely was not recording. But
yes.
I mean, he actually had the trifecta. Yeah,
we always give out our trifectas as soon as the mics go off. So unfortunately, we missed out on that one. But see, did you enjoy the Olympic Games? We got I think plenty of action, plenty of intrigue. Am I wrong there?
Not at all. I first of all, the way it was broadcast, I thought was great for one, and I thought it was great. I mean, especially it's interesting because we're on a DFS show, and so from a DFS perspective, it's really interesting how things can really fluctuate from day to day. Because normally it's post Friday, and you kind of know once Saturday and Sunday roll around, sort of where you stand among the group, but really things changed. And it was, for me, I didn't have a great week necessarily, but Sunday really helped me. So it's just one of those things where it's very rare that you can be sort of out of it and then right back in it on a Sunday.
Not to derail us completely, because I'm sure everyone loves a good bad beat story, but I stone bubbled the 200 single entry. That's my favorite tournament. I stone bubbled it. I had 3 guys in the third place playoff. So 3 out of 7. But CT Pan won, so I guess because I was cashing, but I guess because all of those guys dropped to 4th place points, I literally stone bubbled the thing.
Yeah, Rick, I stone bubbled it at the 3M. Seriously, like right the last guy out or the first guy out was me at the 3M Open in that same exact tournament.
Because I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, I've got 3 of the 7 guys in here. As long as one of them wins it, I'm fine. And then CT Pan won, and I was thinking, okay, well, probably nobody has CT Pan, so that's fine. But I lost all those 3rd place points from my 3 guys, which I was not. Dang it. Get them next time. And that next time is this week. It is Memphis, Tennessee. It is the WGC-FedEx St. Jude Invitational, maybe the second longest PGA tournament name behind the Corrales Punta Cana Resort and Club Championship. And Sia, if you like short field, no cut events with some of the top players in the world and some scrubs in the 300s of the official world golf rankings, boy, do I have an event for you.
Well, I'm in luck because I do like those. And, it's interesting because it's a nice contrast from last week because, yes, last week was a no-cut event, but also last week in that bottom end range, you really, it was kind of a hope and a prayer with a lot of those guys. I mean, if you recall, I was even repping, Rafael Campos just to jam a guy in there, but we don't really have the Rafael Campos, no offense to him, but we don't really have that in this field. We have a lot of guys in that low 6K range that you can play and maybe feel a little bit more comfortable with a stars and scrubs approach if you decide to go that route.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here. This is everything you see will come from my website. It's RickRunGood.com. This is the course key stats tool. And TPC Southwind here, Sia, it's a normal course that we see all the time. It's a regular course on the PGA Tour schedule, but there is a little bit of difference, and I think we have to kind of talk through this. So it's been on the schedule for a long time with what was used to be called the FedEx St. Jude Classic. That was a full field event, one that Daniel Berger won twice, back-to-back years. But 2 years ago, it was elevated to the WGC status, took the place of the WGC Bridgestone, and this will be the 3rd year of this short field, no cut event. So when you're looking at history, you kind of have to be aware of both of those things.
Right. No, I totally agree. And it's one of those things, though, where it has, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been on the same course, though, even though the names have changed. So
yes.
Another thing to keep in mind there. But I do understand what you're saying about the sort of the invitational WGC status of it. That makes it a little bit different. Yeah.
And there is a difference between tournament history and course history because they've used this course every year. But if you look at tournament history and you look 3 years ago, that was the Bridgestone, which was not being held on this course. So just make sure you're paying attention to all of that. It is a par 70, 7,200 yards, and it's Bermuda grass greens. And the thing that I thought was most notable, I mean, there's a couple of things. It's a good little course. I like this course a lot. The most notable thing is that they have smaller than average greens, 4,300 square feet on average. Sia, that skews pretty small on the PGA Tour. There's probably only a handful of courses that have smaller greens than this.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, and also there's some water hazards on the course, which Rick, you tell me, but that makes me kind of want to default to, and it's so easy for me to say, but default to ball strikers. I mean, if you can get a guy that's going to get it on the green, that's
default to ball strikers will be the title of my autobiography,
right? Well, you know, I guess there truly is a trade-off, though, right? Because sometimes when you're doing that, you are limiting yourself with some of the guys that can really kind of get after it, that may have like that sort of Cam Champ type upside. So a guy I'm not going to be playing this week. So I think that's sort of what I'm leaning on. The small greens is a factor. The water hazards are a factor. You know, I personally, I'm not going to weigh off the tee too much. I know that's somewhat correlated depending on what you're looking at. Approach, long irons, that's definitely something I'm going to be looking at. And, you know, Bermuda greens too. I think there's a lot of Bermuda positive guys out here, which you can see right on this course Keys stats page. And it happens to be a lot of guys that I like. So it'll certainly sort of fit that narrative to play those guys.
Okay, we could talk about some of those guys. Yeah, the best Bermuda specialist. So this is, you take your average strokes gained putting, you then isolate each grass type. Sung J M is the best of guys with a decent sample size. Carlos Ortiz is second. Notables who are making the trek back, Sia, because this is going to be another storyline, and because producer Jacob so perfectly listed them out for me, here they are. Here are the guys coming from Tokyo to Memphis: Paul Casey and Tommy Fleetwood, Corey Connors, Victor Hovland, Sung J M, and Siwoo Kim, Mark Leishman, Cam Smith. All four of the American players, that's Xander Morikawa, Reed, Justin Thomas, Hideki, Joaquin Niemann, and Abraham Answer, are all making the trek back. Do we care? Are we downgrading them? Are we upgrading them because they're going back in time? What are we doing?
They are going back in time, technically. That's true. I don't know that it's a huge difference. I do like the fact that they're gaining 13 hours or so. I mean, I guess that matters. But no, I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, it just so happens most of the guys on that list I'm probably not going to be playing. But with that said, there are some guys that I will be playing that we'll talk about later. I like Corey Connors. I like Xander. I like Morikawa. I like Abraham Answer a little bit too. Other than that, though, I don't think I'm going to be on a lot of these guys. So to the extent that's even narrative, it's not really going to affect me too much because there's only a handful that I'm picking out of that pile, if you will.
All right, let's pop over to the cheat sheet here, and there are 6 golfers over $10,000. Finally, Collin Morikawa continuing to get the respect that he deserves. He is a flat $11,000. He is the most expensive golfer on the slate. Our latest gold medalist, Xander Schauffele, is $10,800, followed by Brooks Koepka and Jordan Spieth, with Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy rounding out the $10,000 range. My first observation, Sia, is that Collin Morikawa, even though he is the most expensive golfer on the slate, $11,000, that's not so bad. Like we have routinely seen the most expensive golfer on the slate be more expensive than that.
I don't even know what to say about this guy. He's so, like, he didn't even play that well last week, and he was still contending for a medal. He rates out so well yet again. I mean, week to week, it's always going to be that for Collin Morikawa. The ball striking is there. The long irons, I'm talking, 150 to 200. That's all there. He hits fairways. If you're looking at par fours, 450 to 500, which will be somewhat important. If you care to look at that stat, we will have a lot of par fours in that range. And, lo and behold, he's number one there too. So I agree with you. The only way you'd get off of Collin is if you didn't want to pay that price, or if you just hate the fact that he was, playing in the Olympics last week and it might just be too much. But I like him.
He, for the first time in a long time, lost strokes on approach in Tokyo. So they did have strokes gain data. Hat tip to the Olympics. They had the strokes gain data. I loaded it in. He lost a stroke and a half. That's what you're referring to, right? When you're like, he didn't play all that well. He also, he was bad in a category that he is usually the best at and still finished fourth. That's where we're at now with Collin Morikawa. You give him 4 rounds, you let him play in a short field event. I'm running out of superlatives at this point.
Yeah, and the only difference here is that obviously there is in the top 20 here, it's a little different than the top 20 talent in the field last week. But that does, I mean, all of that top 20 is sort of under Colin Morikawa. I mean, it's interesting that he gained almost 4 strokes putting last week, but you could say that his strokes gained approach was off by probably 6 or 7 strokes on a good Colin Morikawa week. So even if you zeroed out that putter, he's still killing it on a normal approach tournament. So I like Colin a lot, and I'm definitely going to be playing him.
Okay, so the rest of this 10K range, I've zeroed in on Brooks and Spieth. I can talk about those in a second. I have questions about Dustin Johnson, of course, Xander Schauffele. I never seem to get correct, and Rory McIlroy rounds out the rest of this range. Who else is going to be moving the needle for you?
Brooks Koepka. So I like Xander. That's why I hesitated, because I do like Xander. I'm not going to fall into the narrative, well, he just won last week. But, Xander, I've never really been, I was big on him last week, but I haven't really been big on him consistently. And so it's very easy for me to pivot off of him. So I do like Brooks Koepka. I mean, speaking of ball striking, I mean, look at this guy. It's the ball striking is there. It's just one of those things with Brooks where I don't see, and especially now that we're heading towards the FedEx Cup tournament, or the final 125, I just think Brooks is primed to really start getting things under control.
He seems to be getting healthier all the time, seems to be back in Brooksy mode. I mean, 3 consecutive top 6 finishes, 2 of them at major championships. You had in the PGA championship where he finished runner up there. There's certainly nothing to dislike about Brooks Koepka, but I'm a bit partial. I love both these guys, but I'm a bit partial to Jordan Spieth. And I think the thing that we have forgotten about Spieth, or that is not getting talked about enough, is his driver. Because he's one of the best approach players on tour right now, or at least has been in 2021. His short game magic is back. But look at this. Every single event since the Players' Championship, 9 in a row, he's gained strokes off the tee, Sia. And when you compare that to what he did from the Memorial in 2020 to Phoenix of this year, not a single event did he gain strokes off the tee. I mean, there has been a real substantial change with him off the tee that is keeping him in play, and then he can use the rest of the magic, the Spieth magic. So this, to me, is a really special set of results, and I think he's doing some really good stuff here.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I have to pick between Brooks Koepka and Jordan Spieth, for me, it's going to be Brooks Koepka, but we're talking about really small margins here. The thing I really love about Brooks Koepka, we know the putter is volatile with him, but we know it can get hot. But if you look at the last 4 tournaments, 3 of them, Brooks has gained over 8 strokes ball striking. That is just really amazing to me. And it's a guy that I almost feel like Brooks is still a little bit under the radar. Maybe Jordan Spieth is too, because recently he hasn't really been up there as much as people expect. But I like both of those guys, but Brooks is going to be the guy for me behind Colin.
So that leaves us with 2 golfers at the bottom of the $10,000 range. Rory McIlroy, an even $10,000. I've got no problem with deploying Rory here. He was in that 7-for-1 playoff for the bronze medal. He finished 7th at the U.S. Open. He made the cut at the Open Championship in between those starts. I'm okay with that. The big question marks lie with Dustin Johnson, who has missed the cut in his last 2 major championships, right? Or I'm sorry, no, he missed the cut at the PGA Championship, missed the cut at the Masters, played well at the Open Championship, but then missed the cut at the 3M. And now we just continue to question what the heck is going on with Dustin Johnson.
It remains a good question. I don't know what to do. So again, we are starting to, gear down or gear up, however you want to put it, towards the end of the season. And this would be the time, in theory, for Dustin Johnson to really start picking up his game and start chasing some of those huge dollars that are before him. I don't know that, again, you brought up Rory and DJ at the same time. I feel like I like Rory a little bit better. I agree that DJ might seem a little bit more sneaky, and therefore he might be a little less owned if you want to go that route. But what's interesting about Rory last week, watching him, there were times I thought he was really good, and there were times where I thought he was really bad, especially on the greens. I mean, some of these, especially in the first couple of days, he was missing some of these putts by what I thought to be a pretty wide margin for anybody, let alone Rory McIlroy. So I kind of think Rory, I don't expect that from him. And I kind of think he's ready to really get it going. So between those two, I like Rory. I think they're both going to be relatively contrarian relative to the guys towards the top, though.
This stretch of 5 events for Rory in the approach category are probably his best 5 since the restart. I mean, he is looking like the version of Rory on approach that we saw where, remember, he was piling up all those top 5 finishes and he was the hottest player on earth. And then it was the Players Championship and everything got shut down. And then when he came back, he was pedestrian. We're starting to see that again, where he gains 4 or 5 strokes on approach over the course of 4 days. That's really scary. I agree. He's bubbling. He's about to boil over. I think it seems like it's coming much more than at least the advanced metrics might indicate for DJ, who, I don't know, seems to be all over the place. So it's interesting. We'll see. The $9,000 range. This is where things get super juicy because these are a lot of really good names that are cheaper than usual. And it starts with Justin Thomas, Victor Hovland, and Louis Oosthuizen. It continues with Bryson DeChambeau, Hideki Matsuyama, and Patrick Cantlay. And then it's rounded out by Daniel Berger, Scotty Scheffler, and Paul Casey. There it is. Thank you. I didn't know if we were going to hit it or not. I didn't give him a heads up, so I wasn't sure, Sia. Sorry about that. How does this 9K range look to you, my friend?
When are we going to drop Justin Thomas below Victor Hovland and Louis Oosthuizen? Because we have rightfully, I say we, DraftKings has rightfully dropped Bryson down to probably where he belongs right now, which is below those two guys. I just don't really see it with JT. I'm not seeing the consistency at all. Yeah, you could say there's plenty of upside, but can't you say that about the guys that are right under him too in the same exact manner when it comes to Louis and Victor Hovland? Maybe not so much Bryson, but I'm not on him, which is why I go right below him to your Victor Hovlands and your Louis of the world.
So it's funny you brought up Justin Thomas and Bryson DeChambeau because I was looking at this earlier today. Since JT's win at the Players, that's the point where it's been like hasn't been so good. So what I did is I plugged in here on my site every date after that. So since March 15th, which was the Monday after the Players Championship, Justin Thomas is averaging 0.93 strokes gained per round. That is the second worst of any golfer, $9,000 or more this week. The only other guy worse is the other one you mentioned. It's Bryson DeChambeau. So these two are really, I don't want to say they're overpriced because you're paying for the upside, I presume, is what you are paying for. But that does not change the fact that they have been disappointing for the last 5 months.
Oh, Rick, that's okay. I'll say it. They're overpriced.
Okay.
I mean, especially Justin Thomas. I think Bryson is overpriced too, but not egregiously so. And I only say it's egregious because I just don't think Justin Thomas should be more than Victor Hovland or Louis Oosthuizen. Maybe there's an argument for Louis, but it's a bad argument, but at least it's an argument. But I don't think there's an argument for him being over Hovland. So I definitely think, listen, Justin's probably not going to be super high owned. So, I mean, even though he does carry a lot of ownership typically because of that upside you mentioned, but I think he will be slightly contrarian because most people will want to pivot down to Victor or Louis or pivot up to maybe Rory or, DJ or Spieth. But yeah, I'm not there. So that's why, Victor, Louis, and then we go down to the 9,100 range. Mm-hmm. I do like Scotty Scheffler quite a bit. I mean, speaking of ball striking, we just brought up ball striking with Brooks Koepka. Well, if you want, we can take a look with Scheffler. The ball striking has been incredible and the putter can get hot. It's the exact type of upside that I think people are envisioning with Justin Thomas, but that's not really reality right now. I think Scheffler has the same upside that a Justin Thomas has. Yeah,
he has been really impressive. The advanced metrics look good. The putter is volatile in a good way. He's piling up results. There's a lot to like about Scotty Scheffler. I am a hair partial in the bottom of that range to Patrick Cantlay. So what I did is I pulled up essentially all the results for events that have small greens, which I believe I have in here as 5,000 square feet or smaller. And Patrick Cantlay has been the number one player in those events. And you start to look at his results and they start to get pretty scary. Here are his just last handful of results on small green events. 13th win, missed cut, 3rd, 2nd, 35th, 32nd, 7th, 11th, 11th, 17th, 12th, 12th, 15th, win, 3rd. I mean, he's piling up top 15 finishes, and I don't know what people are going to want to do with him. I mean, how does this $9,000 range shake out in terms of ownership?
Well, it's funny because I think Patrick Cantlay is the type of guy that people initially are going to look at and say, I'm not really interested in playing Patrick Cantlay. But as the week progresses, they're just going to look at that number 9,300 next to his name and look at, things that you mentioned, which you can see on Rick Run Good, of course, and just be like, I gotta jam Patrick Cantlay. And so to your point, I think Louis and Patrick Cantlay and maybe Scheffler, actually Berger as well. I think all those guys are going to be popular. And what that's going to do is probably level out that popularity. So I don't think there's going to be anybody that's going to really spike in the 9K range, but I think there's going to be a lot of people here that are going to have a lot of ownership, especially those four guys I mentioned.
I'm trying to see who else. We quickly glossed over Victor Hovland. You mentioned you like him. I do as well. He's just so darn good and seems to have the right perspective and seems so much more mature. There are two guys in this $9,000 range that we have not talked about who both finished fourth last week at the Olympics. One is Hideki Matsuyama. The other is Paul Casey. I don't know. I don't know what to do with them. I think it's almost a plethora of riches at this point, right? In the 9K range, there's a lot of guys that you like that you can't play them all. You have to draw a line somewhere, and maybe I draw the line at these two.
Yeah, I like Casey a lot better than I like Hideki. I think, Hideki overall, he was good last week, but, other than his huge win, he hasn't really been that consistent. And I think Paul Casey really has. And on a course like this, which is going to play pretty difficult, I think Casey probably has the metrics I'm looking for, particularly on approach with those, irons between 150 and 200. He doesn't pepper fairways as much as I'd like, perhaps, but I think Casey at 9,000 is probably a value. I think that might be if he's low owned, which I don't expect him to be, but if he is, I think he's a nice pivot off guys like Cantlay or Berger, who I expect to have higher ownership.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued with how the ownership plays out in this range because they can't all be popular, but I feel like they could. I can make a case for a lot of these guys, so I'll be interested to see how that shakes out, which will probably help with some decision making as well. So we'll see. Here's what we're going to do. We got to drop down to the 8K range. We've got to get into some value on this board. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. $8,000 range has some very interesting names and a lot of guys that played at the Olympics last week. It starts with Tony Finau and Matt Fitzpatrick. It goes down to Corey Connors and Tommy Fleetwood. Oh, boy. Where do you want to start here, Sia?
Well, I'll start by saying I think Fitzpatrick's probably going to be pretty popular. I think he sets up well here. His history here is obviously very good with a 6th and a 4th in the last 2 years. I think I probably won't be playing much Matt Fitzpatrick. I don't think Reed is going to be popular, nor should he be, in my opinion. I might be pivoting sort of to this low 8K range. And I do think this 8K range is so interesting because I think most of these guys have the upside to actually contend Sunday afternoon. Whereas in the 7K range, you can make some arguments for sure, but maybe not as many guys. So in the 8K range, I mean, I got to say, I think Abraham Answer is right up there. I think Webb Simpson is really interesting, even though the ball striking has been really poor, frankly, for quite some time for Webb. He did, I think it was 19th at the Open. I think he's starting to come into form. This course is a little bit long for him, but I think he's a interesting play at 8,500. That just screams value to me. So I like him, Answer, and Connors.
Do you ever play the game? This is a game that I play a lot. It's just like the ultimate buy low game because you brought up Webb Simpson. He's $8,500 outside of the Open Championship a couple of weeks ago, which I'm going to throw out because major pricing is a little bit wonky. This is the cheapest he has been since this event 2 years ago. Since July of 2019, he was 8,200. That was the last time he was this cheap, and he finished second. Not that he's going to finish second again, but it's one of these opportunities to. I mean, this is floor pricing for Webb. He can't get any. He cannot get any lower than this, seemingly.
Yeah, and there's a couple guys in the 7K range. One in particular, spoiler alert, Tyrrell Hatton, where his price is like crazy. But there's reason for it, obviously. But I think with both Tyrrell Hatton, who we'll get to, and Webb Simpson, I think the upside is really there. So it's one of those things where I don't want to belabor the ownership thing because we don't need, I think some people get caught up in ownership a little bit too much, especially in like single entry and 3 max where it might not, or cash games where it's not quite as important. But I'm really curious to see the ownership on Webb Simpson. How scared are people of his recent play versus what his price is, his floor price? Because you'll never see a price lower than this for Webb Simpson.
I'm glad you mentioned Corey Connors, and I've mentioned this a couple of weeks in a row, so I won't I won't continue, but I'm fascinated with the way the public is treating Corey Connors right now, and he just continues to pile up like top 15 finishes or top 20 finishes, and the price keeps going down. Nobody seems to really care about it. I don't know. He's just always around. This seems like a good spot for him. But the one guy that continues to stand out to me has to be Shane Lowry, and he's going to make the trek back from Tokyo as well. And he is now on a streak by gaining 5.5 strokes on approach last week in Tokyo, which was the third best mark of anybody in the field. He has now gained strokes on approach in 10, count them, 10 consecutive measured events. And it's not just a little bit either, Sia. It's 3, 4, 5 over the course of a week. I'm sorry, Shane. I generally don't like you. I generally don't like to play you. You're doing good things right now, man. This is solid.
What's interesting, though, and I'd love your perspective on this, and I have something along these lines to say about Corey Connors as well. So I'll ask both. So for one, does the off the tee game kind of scare you and the putter? Because you can see, obviously, like he's not exactly finishing high in some of these. He's gaining 5 strokes here, 4 strokes here, but 22nd, tied for 65th. Obviously, I'm cherry picking a little bit because right before that, tied for 6th, tied for 4th. But
Yes.
but I'm just saying, like, the approach game is definitely there. But on this course, are you a little bit more worried about the off the tee game? And my question for Connors, by the way, is, the short game for Connors is pretty problematic. So does that, because he seems to be setting up as a guy that a lot of people will be on because of the value. And if you can get off of Corey Connors at 8,100 and pivot somewhere else, you might be in really good shape. And I think that short game could get him in trouble.
So yes, I'm worried about Lowry, but listen, at this price, I'm worried about a lot of guys. Also, I'm probably less worried about Connors because I was worried. I will tell you, I was worried last week about Connors. I ended up playing him in my core because of the 2 straight events that he lost strokes on approach. And I was like, that's not him. That can't be him. Let's just see what happens. And he looked good in Tokyo, right? This is basically the exact metric line that I would want from Corey Connors. Gain 2 strokes off the tee, gain 2 strokes on approach, be a positive around the green, and be close to a 0 putter. Like that. Mm-hmm. That's a very Corey Connors stat line, which makes me more comfortable that we're going to just get vintage Corey Connors most weeks. So I have less concern about him. But yeah, sure, there are certainly concerns about all these guys.
Fair enough.
The rest of this $8,000 range, I'm trying to see here. You mentioned, I don't think Patrick Reed is going to be popular. I would agree. He's not playing 4 weeks in a row with plenty of travel, and the first 3 weren't particularly great. I mean, he finished 22nd at the Olympics. That has to be a disappointment considering his odds, the caliber of play, his pricing. Finished 34th at the 3M Open and missed the cut at the Open Championship. So I imagine he's not going to be that popular. You mentioned Answer earlier, right? You said you like Answer.
A lot. And he rates out in my model really well, which I'm not, I'm not married to my model, so to speak. So that's just kind of like another sort of piece of evidence that I look at. But speaking of ball strikers, I mean, you don't look now, but I mean, Abraham Answer is a really, really good ball striker. And there's really nothing to really criticize in his game. Obviously, around the green, he's not necessarily great, but everywhere else, he really checks out.
Yeah, he really does. There's a lot of himself putting himself in position, giving himself birdie looks. I do wonder what his ceiling is, although we've seen him finish inside the top 5 countless times here recently, but his floor does seem to be a very, very high. The $7,000 range. This is where things start to get really interesting. So Will Zalatoris is back in action. He leads off the $7,000 range. If you remember, he was in that really thick stuff at Royal St. George's. He took a swing, immediately doubles over. He had mentioned it sent, I believe he said shooting pains down his back and leg is the way he described it, and withdrew from the Open Championship, and he hasn't played since. He is back. He leads off the $7,000 range. Sung Jae Im is in this range. Terrell Hatton, we talked about or mentioned earlier, is in this range, and it goes down to Justin Rose and Ian Poulter. Where do you want to start the conversation?
Man, pain shooting down his leg from his back. That's not super comforting in terms of like wanting to play him. So I guess we'll have to monitor maybe the practice rounds and maybe some of the press conferences just to see where we're at with that. But, there's a couple guys that I've been leaning on for quite some time, and that's Jason Kokrak and Harris English. I really, really like those guys. And there's another guy I like, and that's Terrell Hatton, who I mentioned. And again, when you're talking GPP, Hatton's not a cash game play for me, but when you're talking GPP, you're obviously looking for upside. And for the record, I think Hatton is a great course fit. He just happens to not be playing well. But I like the 3 of those guys from a value standpoint quite a bit.
Yeah, let's go through them because I'm definitely with you on English and Hatton. I've got Jason Kokrak up now, and listen, this is fine. This is the type of golfer that we would expect Jason Kokrak to be. You generally a pretty good ball striker. He's been one of the best putters on tour this year, so there's nothing out of the ordinary there. The Harris English stuff, pretty exciting. Pretty exciting for a lot of reasons. So he is now 3 consecutive events where he has gained strokes in each and every strokes gained category. That is Harris English, right? I laid out what Corey Connors did in Tokyo, and I said that was vintage Corey Connors. This is vintage Harris English, and this is the version of him in 2020 where he was constantly contending. He was one of the best strokes gained players. He then finally goes out and wins the Tournament of Champions, and he falls off a little bit. As soon as he got back to his DNA, he won again. Like as soon as he got back to his DNA.
Yeah, and there's no reason to think that he can't contend here. I mean, first of all, he won at the Travelers, and he's been, since he's been back. I mean, US Open, he finished 3rd. So there's really no. And I forgive me, I usually have the guys I like that are sort of in this range. I usually have their outright numbers. Maybe Jacob could check and tell us later in the show. But I actually think he's a pretty decent outright or top 10 play.
I thought I saw him at 35-1 when I was looking earlier. I can pull this up on William Hill as well, but I'm pretty sure he was 35-1. And then Hatton, there's a lot to unpack here with Hatton, but the $7,400 price tag is pretty jarring. And, in the same way that Webb Simpson is the lowest he has been or the cheapest he has been in a long time, Tyrrell Hatton is the same way. So Hatton, the last time he was 7,400, technically the 2020 Players Championship, that event did not finish. It was the 2 starts before that at WGC Mexico. He was 7,400. He would go on to finish 6th that week. So this is a price we have not seen on Tyrrell Hatton since February of 2020.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, I can't believe how far he's fallen, but honestly, this price is too low. If I had to reprice Hatton, I would price him at 8,000, 8,100 because first of all, he hasn't been terrible. He hasn't been so look, if we're looking at it now, at the Palmetto, he gained 11.75 strokes ball striking. That is an astounding number. I'm sure, Rick, in your database, that's got to be somewhere, I don't know, maybe top 10, top 20. You tell me.
It's pretty good.
It's an absurd number. And so he's coming off back-to-back, cuts at tougher venues. But I think it's the right time to speculate on a guy like that, especially when you've seen it recently.
That Tyrrell Hatton week. Well, hold on. I want to do a couple of things first. So I had something else. Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned how far he has fallen, which is really only in public sentiment, because in his last 5 starts, he has 2 top 8 finishes. One of them is that T2 at the Palmetto, and he made the cut at the PGA Championship. It's the fact that he missed 2 cuts at major championships. You know what I actually think happens? So here's my guess on what happens here. So DraftKings has really soft pricing for majors, right? And he got really soft pricing for the US Open and he missed the cut. So at the Open Championship, they said, okay, what did we have him at the last major? Let's lower his price. And he misses the cut there. Then they fire up the pricing algorithm or the guy in a spreadsheet this week and says, well, missed the cut. I got to lower his price again. And now we're here at a very cheap Tyrrell Hatton when he shouldn't be.
And for the record, the cherry on top, if you go to and I'm not asking you to because we already looked at it, but if you go to your Course Key Stats page, guess who was among the top on Bermuda?
I would imagine it's Tyrrell Hatton.
I would imagine it's Tyrrell Hatton as well.
Here he is, right there. Producer Jacob letting us know that it is 45-1 at the new, I guess it's called Caesars Sportsbook now instead of William Hill.
All right.
So I don't know if I have to call it that moving forward, but our friends over at Caesars Sportsbook have it at 45-1.
I think that's the new terminology. And I love that number. Honestly, I think at 35-1, it was somewhat fair, but not great. I think 45-1 is great.
I'm trying to see who else in this range. It's kind of an awkward range because if you look at just this last 2 years where this event has been the short field, no cut, there's not a lot of great success out of these guys. Billy Horschel is the only guy who has finished inside the top 25 both years. There's a lot of guys who haven't played it. There's a lot of guys who have only played it once. There's not a lot of top 25 finishes from any of them. It's kind of a little awkward awkward pricing range, isn't it?
It is, but I think if we're talking about other golfers, I'm not necessarily saying I like these guys, but Sergio, I think is interesting. I think Brian Harman is always interesting because he's a relatively good ball striker. Zalatoris, of course, is going to be at 7,900. I think people are going to look at that and be like, I think I might have to have some shares of Zalatoris. As far as Sergio, I mean, I started the show saying I'm looking for ball strikers, right? So, I mean, he would certainly make sense, but I just don't have faith in the putter with Sergio. I mean,
yeah, here's the dilemma with Sergio, because I had the same question. He has either, so let's see here. He lost, he lost 7.3 strokes putting at the 3M Open and finished T25, which is first of all very impressive. But I can't be a part of this. I can't be a part of this. I can't watch a guy gain 7 strokes on approach, gain 2 off the tee, and finish 25th. He led the field tee to green and finished 25th.
And if it was the only instance of that, you would be like, all right, well, whatever. But like on that page, you could see he's lost 6 strokes here. He's lost 5 strokes here putting. It's just a little too much. Now, I mean, obviously he's shown he can gain a couple strokes putting recently, but over 4 days, I don't see it. I don't know. Maybe the no cut thing for Sergio, maybe the putting yips or whatever you want to call it sort of gets out of his head because maybe there's a little less pressure days 1, 2, and 3. I don't know. That's, I mean, total narrative building there, and it's probably completely inaccurate, but I'm just not, I will have a share or two. Let's say I build 20 lineups. I'll probably have 1 or 2 that actually have Sergio, but in my big, we talked about the 200 SE, 100 SE, whatever it is, I don't think I'm going to be anywhere near Sergio Garcia.
Yeah, I confirmed that. He led the field by 2.5 strokes tee to green at the 3M Open and finished T25. Oh boy.
Feels impossible.
It honestly does feel impossible, actually. That's where I say this a lot, and I'm almost always lying where I'm like, oh, I could have done that. Like I could have made an 8 on 18 to win the event. Like I might have lost less than 7 strokes putting.
He's the ultimate outlier. Like anytime you're looking at statistical data and you think outliers, like now I just think Sergio Garcia. It just doesn't make any sense.
$6,000 range. Things start to get a little bit hairy, but there are some guys I'm interested in. There is a Ryan Palmer sighting at 6,500. It starts with Cam Davis and Sam Burns at 69, and it goes down to the min, which is Wade Ormsby, Wilco Nienaber, Robert Streb, and Jim Herman rounding out the min-priced golfers. Sia, what do you see?
Can we start from the bottom again?
Sure.
Because
there are no rules here.
You basically italicized the name Jim Herman for no reason other than that he's at the very bottom.
Correct.
By the way, he's been playing pretty well. And also, he's an excellent Twitter follower. He's like top 3 in my book. He might even be passing Max Homo on the Twitter following. He's actually
okay. He's not that good.
He's hilarious. He is so beautifully sarcastic. I love it. So, but here's the thing. You're not picking him because of Twitter, obviously. Or maybe you are.
Maybe you are. I don't know.
In which case, him and Max Homo would be great picks. But he hits fairways, for one. He has a solid long iron game. He's been the last 4 tournaments. He's finished within the top 30, which is impressive for most golfers, let alone somebody who's bottom of the barrel pricing. And he's also gained in ball striking and putting in 5 tournaments in a row. I mean, what are we talking here?
Yeah, this is actually it's actually pretty good, Sia. So when you said Rafael Campos last week, I was like, no, I can't get there. Yeah, but here we go. That's okay. We've got another min price guy that now this looks a lot better. Now, if you remember, Herman was the guy who missed like 30 cuts in a row and then won. And that is not really what we're seeing right now. 4 consecutive top 30 finishes. The advanced metrics all look pretty strong. Off the tee approach, putting, he's pretty bad around the greens, but so are a lot of guys. He's the min price. This I like a lot more than Rafael Campos. This is pretty good, actually. I like
and this data is pretty recent, whereas in the Rafael Campos argument, I had to sort of go off the chart a little bit to find something I liked. Again, even if you didn't look at the metrics, and this is almost the Vincent, I guess, was it Vincent Whaley from a couple months ago where he was, 6,400 and 6,200 and whatever. Just looking at sort of the Vincent Whaley part of the argument where if you remember back then, before he made like 9 cuts in a row, it was like 4 or 5 cuts in a row. It's like, just looking at that, you're like, all right, well, that's pretty impressive. But then you actually look at the metrics and the metrics check out as well. I mean, if I don't know this guy's name is Jim Herman, I'm just looking at the top 30s, the ball striking and the putting and the relative lack of a short game. I'm thinking, all right, this guy's price is probably 7,100. I don't know, 6,700. But his name's Jim Herman, and it's just one of those things where he's 6,000. But that's an underprice.
Yeah, you can actually see like the visual uptick of his strokes gained in here at the end here in the last couple of months. It's actually pretty interesting. Which made me think, if we were making an all Twitter team and we started with Homa and Hermy, first of all, we'd have a ton of money left over. Who else would be on this team? None of these guys at the top are all that good at Twitter. I guess Brooks would be in there. Okay.
Yeah, Brooks has got to be in there.
Do you get Patrick Reed and his orbit, or just Patrick Reed? Because Patrick Reed's Twitter is not so great, but his orbit's much better.
No, I don't think you can go orbit there. I think you're just getting Patrick Reed, unfortunately.
I think you just get Patrick Reed's verified Twitter and not any other account that's also verified, that's also on the same.
But I don't want it. I don't want Patrick Reed's verified Twitter account. You could go Brooks Bryson. Bryson at least pumps a lot of content. Brooks Bryson, Homa, Hermy. So we need somebody down here. Are any of these guys any good at Twitter?
Is Ian Poulter?
He's on there.
Ian Poulter.
Flat 7,000. I haven't done the math yet. He's very good, but we probably have a lot of money left.
I mean, Cam Smith, just by virtue of the mullet pictures, or no? And his wife hates it. No, probably not.
I mean, maybe the rest of these guys, I don't even know how much they even tweet.
I'm reaching. That's limited upside with the mullet thing.
Jacob, give us a sixth guy here, and somebody will play this and probably win all the money.
Oh, this is tough.
Kisner.
Yeah, I was thinking Kisner.
We'd leave a lot on the table, but Kisner could be that guy.
Possibly Bubba. What's Bubba priced at?
He's not in this.
He's not in the field. That would be good though.
Oh, would be good.
Phil.
Oh, Phil.
Ooh, Phil for sure.
66.
Yeah, it has to be Phil. There you go. Somebody play that, win the money, and send us our shares. Okay, the rest of the $6,000 range. Speaking of Homa, I was pretty intrigued by Homa. Again, this is the range. You are. I mean, you're doing a little like trying to be early, like trying to be Cam Champ early, right? You're just trying to find somebody who might be laying the blueprint. I think it might be Homa. So 5 straight events, he's gained strokes off the tee. He's been okay on approach. He has been horrible in the short game. Now, he actually told us that when he came on the first cut. I think it would have been before US Open. And he was like, yeah, I'm working really hard. I've been hemorrhaging strokes. Yeah, he has. Seems to have fixed the short game. The putter I worry about, but at least with him, Sia, we talk about this all the time. The ability to gain 6.5 strokes putting or 5 strokes putting in a single week is special, and not a lot of guys can do it. This is the type of map that I would want to see for someone I'm trying to get early on.
I agree. I love the upside. I will point out, though, if you're looking at the quote anti-Bermuda specialist, unfortunately, he is on that list. So it's probably less likely for him to gain a ton. It's not impossible, obviously. It's just probably a little less likely for him to gain a bunch of strokes like you see those pops in the 2 tournaments you pointed out. But yeah, I mean, Homa's on my list of guys that I think has the upside. I mean, he doesn't feel like a golfer, but I'll tell you this. I think Carlos Ortiz is interesting too. I think, again, one thing you have to consider, I mean, this is a really obvious point, and I would say it in the same vein as like a Ryan Palmer or even a Stuart Sink, and I do like Stuart Sink quite a bit, is these guys aren't going to miss the cut. So, you're looking for that upside that's going to get you maybe like 3 really good days and maybe 1 really bad one, which is why a lot of these guys are in play. But yeah.
I was wondering what happened to Carlos Ortiz on Sunday in Tokyo, because he was in that thing. So I'm just looking it up now. He lost 9.6 strokes on Sunday, lost in everything across the board. He's basically like Sam Burns, right? Remember when Sam Burns would have 3 great rounds and then he'd blow up one. So he was great outside of Sunday in Tokyo.
That's alarming. I hadn't seen the round 4 stats until, looking at it just now. That almost like screams to me like heat exhaustion or something. That's super speculative, but like, I don't know how you go from, gaining strokes in a pretty significant way the first couple of rounds to losing almost 10. That's interesting.
9.6. That is, it really is. You wonder what happened, because he lost across the board. It wasn't one thing. It's by far the worst round I have on him in my database, which for him is probably his entire career. That's interesting. I don't know what happened there. To lose 9.6 is quite a lot. We'll see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anybody else in this range?
So I mentioned Stuart Sink. I'd love to get your thoughts on him. I mean, he hasn't really been great lately, and a lot of that though is a rough patch with the putter. So the ball striking has still been pretty good. I mean, it's not been great. It hasn't been consistent, but that's why he's 6,500, right? At the Travelers, he gained over 9.4 strokes ball striking. I think there's something to be said for that. And again, 6,500. It's a nice price for a guy who's won this year a couple of times.
Yeah. And he's 21st on tour in strokes gained approach, which is always something you want to see here. And where he won is, I don't want to say it's a close comp because Harbor Town is, it's not, but like the small green aspect of it, I think is kind of interesting. And I do think it's a thing. I think that when these guys look at their shot and they just see a little postage stamp up there, it's a bit of a mental battle as much as it is a physical one. So I certainly don't mind that. But no, I mean, he's a ball striking maven, and we haven't seen him since the 3M Open. So he's had a week or two to kind of get right. And Bermuda is, I mean, he's very bad on bent grass greens. He's bad on POA. Bermuda's his best surface. He's not awesome on it, but it is his best putting surface.
Rick, I got to ask you, because we've talked about these guys a lot lately, and you were on the Cam Davis train before most. Matthew Wolff and Cam Davis, any interest there?
Unfortunately, probably not. I think that there are, for Cam Davis, there are some very specific courses. I think that the result at 3M, a 28th place finish, you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense around TPC Twin Cities. The Rocket Mortgage stuff around Detroit Golf Club, I mean, literally, I couldn't have picked a better course for him. I'm not sure this is it. I think you've got to be a little bit better in terms of playing out of the fairway for Cam Davis. I hope I'm wrong. And I hope he breaks that narrative. And I hope that he's just like, I don't need to do that, or I can start hitting more fairways, but I'm worried about that. And then Matthew Wolff, admittedly, and we were talking about this before we went hot, I don't know what to do with him. And I'm not sure anybody knows what to do. The fact that he's 6,800 and his price is being bounced around, not only on DraftKings, but over at Caesar Sportsbook. I mean, no one knows what to do with him. And I'm certainly in that camp. You know, here's his 4 starts since the US Open. Gained 4.5 strokes off the tee. That's the version we want to see. Loses off the tee at the Travelers. A small winner at the Rocket Mortgage. Horrible at the 3M. I mean, this is his weapon. And I think it's really, really concerning when he has one good driving week since last October.
Yeah, that's
what it is, right?
Yeah, when you put it like that, I totally agree. The only argument for him right now is, well, maybe he finds it and he's not getting cut. So, but again, you know, you don't have a lot of par 5s here, right, Rick? I mean, there's not going to be a lot. This is a tough course. You're not going to have a lot of eagle opportunities. You're not going to, I don't think his length, of course it's an advantage, but I don't think it's a huge advantage. And that's why, you know, now that I think about it, I don't think he has sort of the upside that maybe people think.
Yeah, this to me is just red flags blaring when a guy who is literally the best driver of the golf ball on tour or top 3 is losing multiple strokes a week off the tee for that long of a time. I'm worried about that. Unfortunately.
Rick, can I ask you one more favor before we leave this ring?
Sure.
As president of the Ryan Palmer fan club, I feel like I need to see his ball striking as a play.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Mr. Palmer, please. All right, Ryan Palmer. We don't have, so the advanced metrics do not exist from the Open Championship. He missed the cut. At the US Open, he missed the cut, but he gained 2.5 strokes on approach in 2 rounds. That's pretty good. It's a little hairy on approach after that, but he's been driving it well.
Yeah, very interesting. I think he's a guy to potentially speculate on him because I think the ownership will be very low.
Yeah, he has been, you can see dropping like a rock. Is that phrase? Dropping like a rock?
I think that's it.
Dropping like a brick, something like that. But yes, he was, 15%, 15 drop. Sorry.
Stone.
I don't think that's it.
I feel like it's rock.
I think it's rock too. All right. 2 versus 1. 15% down to 7, 8. He was 4% owned at the Open Championship. So yes, I do not think sentiment very high on Mr. Palmer at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough. That's Sia Nejad. This has been your DFS preview for this week's WGC-FedEx St. Jude Invitational. We will be back on Tuesday with a mega preview pod. Producer Jacob does all the hard work behind the scenes. Thank you, Producer Jacob. Also, Sia Nejad is available on Twitter for all your bad beats and hot takes. DM him. Send them directly to @Sia Nejad. He loves them. You can find me @RickRunGood. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.